Hey everybody, welcome to the YouTube channel. My name is Sin, Soul Collective TCG, and today we are going to be talking about Flesh and Blood ProQuest season. This video is actually going to be aimed more towards new players entering the ProQuest scene for the first time since the last ProQuest season, about same time last year. So without further ado, we're going to dive right into it. Today I'm going to be talking about a couple things you should expect from your local ProQuest, a few tips and tricks to kind of just, navigate the first step in Legend Story Studio and Flesh and Blood's kind of competitive ladder. Starting off with what's ProQuest. So ProQuest is a season in Flesh and Blood prior to the Pro Tour, prior to the Worlds. It's kind of like the beginning step of the competitive ladder. It's hosted at your local game stores. Your local game stores will be hosting these events. They're typically class constructed, ban list active, and why is this an important thing? Why do I encourage new players to go to ProQuest? So I encourage new players to go to ProQuest mainly because it's the first step in competitive play. You go to your local armories every week, you play in events every week, and that's all fine and great. But now, say maybe you want to take the next step and say, like, where do I start to try and get into the more competitive side of Flesh and Blood? Well, ProQuest is kind of your entry into that, the first foray, if you will, into playing competitively at a higher level. That's not maybe as high as going to a calling, or as high as even playing in, like, nationals or something higher level than that. Couple tips and tricks. These events are usually judged. They should be judged, and they are judged by level 1 Flesh and Blood judges. So with that being said, you want to make sure that whatever deck you play, whatever you're playing against, that you are very well versed in the rules of Flesh and Blood. Because, I would hate to see a new player get any warnings or cautions or disqualifications for making bad plays, and going from there. So about a year ago, I started playing. About a year and a half ago, at this point, I started playing Flesh and Blood, and my first experience with higher level competitive play was ProQuest. Was the previous ProQuest season. It was actually the Everfest ProQuest season where Bravo, star of the show, was running rampant. I took my girl Briar to the one ProQuest that I did play at Mr. Cards, or I believe it was Mr. Cards. No, it was Yeah, it was a place in Ohio. I cannot remember exactly off the top of my head. But at that time, here in our area, in the Pittsburgh area, we didn't have ProQuests yet, because most stores hadn't gone to the level that LSS had given them ProQuest. So around Everfest is around the time when the Pittsburgh area started really picking up the game. So, number one thing you want to know for ProQuest would have to be, make sure you're ready for it. I mean, have fun with it. You want to have, like, this experience as, to, like, learn the higher levels and the intricacies of competitive Flesh and Blood. But at the end of the day, have fun with it. If you're a new player starting within the past 6 months of the game, and it's not even an insult, you might actually do very well, depending on what your local meta looks like. So tip number one would be local meta. If you play and are playing in a ProQuest in your local area, and you already have a pretty good idea of what kinds of decks you're going to be seeing in your local area, prepare for that. Look up some sideboard guides for whatever hero you're playing, and get some practice maybe on Talishar with those matchups. Definitely a good first tip is to kind of prepare yourself, know what you're getting into, and know your deck very well. So that comes to selecting a hero. ProQuests reward Pro Tour invites. The Pro Tour is a significantly competitive event. So with that, you may get some folks coming from outside the local area to play in these events, to essentially try to earn their spot for their Pro Tour. So the competitive field is a little bit higher, if not a lot higher, than your local armory. So this is a little more significant than your local armory in the sense of, you know, everybody is kind of there to play to win. Everybody is playing to win. Everybody wants that first place spot. So prepare yourself in knowing that there will be competition. You will get checked on rules. Folks will be looking to check you on rules. You know, that's not to say folks are being mean about it. It's to say that folks are there to win. And that is just the nature of the ProQuest season. So as a new player, I understood, and I understand as a new player, that can feel daunting. That can feel very like, I don't want to say toxic, but it can feel rude if someone's like correcting you on something or somebody calls a judge over on something. I promise you it's nothing personal. It is essentially at these events, folks are there to win. Even though it is at your local game store, it is at a place that you are familiar with, folks are there to win, and that's something very important to keep in mind because you should also be there to win. If you are going, you should be there to win. Be there to play your best with your best deck and be there to win. With competition at ProQuest being so high, typically, you're going to run into some very competitive players that are very experienced. Which leads me into my next kind of mental tip to kind of surviving the day. Mental tip is, you know, if you get your losses early on, take your losses with a grain of salt. You know, if you're a newer player, it is completely okay to go into a ProQuest and 0-3 drop or 0-2 drop or just get completely shut out of it. You know, it's okay to do that because you are still getting that competitive experience and becoming a better player through it. The one thing you have to remember is if you take a loss, you kind of just have to let it just drop like any frustration you had towards what could have won you the game, what could have gone differently. You got to drop that and just move on. Always be focusing on the next match. You know, focus on this match, but then focus on the next match after that. I think that's something that a lot of players get caught up in, and they'll take a loss very early on, get really upset about it, and it throws them off for the rest of the day. You have to just kind of take all your losses with a grain of salt. Understand that, you know, this is experience at the very least, both in the sense of, you know, 6 times XP for a rated event, and also in the sense of you are learning the game. So please remember that. Don't get, you know, discouraged with the entire game just because you took a loss in ProQuest. It's a competitive scene. You have to really just learn to, you know, take those losses with a grain of salt, move forward. Eventually you will become a better player for it. You know, learning from those mistakes is important. So there's that. Another tip, a lot of times ProQuests, they go on for a while. So like if you're doing well and you made it through those first couple rounds, you still have a possibility for top 8ing. You might want to pack some like granola bars or something like that alongside with you. Most ProQuests do offer kind of like a lunch break, like an hour-long lunch break. Some of the better game stores, they offer like, you know, pizza or something like that throughout the day. So you might want to kind of just like check in with your local game store, see what their plan is for that, see what their plan is for lunch, and go from there. Additionally, you know, I know my experience playing in major tournaments, whether it be like a 1K or any like long-winded experience, you know, you want to kind of have snacks with you for in between rounds, like a granola bar. I personally really like the Nature Valley like biscuits. Like they're like $10 for a pack of 14 of them. Really nice, really cool stuff. Really good stuff too because it's really good protein food. Another thing is get a good night's sleep before. Honestly, because it's going to be an early day in most cases, and it's going to be a long day. So try to get a good night's sleep before ProQuest. And a lot of what I like to do before going to bed before those events is I will write out my deck list, because at ProQuest events, deck lists are required. So, you know, I like to write out my deck list after I decide, hey, this is the deck that I'm going to be running that day. I go to LSS's website, I just print out a bunch of deck list sheets. You know, you can just fill those out. That way, there's no issues. You can show up the next day, hand the judge your deck list when you pay for entry or whatever you're doing, and be done with it. And that's another good tip that I'd like to say. Make sure your deck list is correct. Make sure you do not have any cards in your deck box that are not in your deck list. cards in your deck box should only be the cards that are in your deck list. If they are not, it is possible you get a caution or a disqualification. I'm not quite sure what the judge ruling ends up being there, but it can happen. So just trying to help new players avoid any of those small judge infractions that could really just ruin the overall day. You know, make sure whatever cards are in your deck box are what are on your deck list and no other cards. Period. Another thing that I see often, or I sometimes see at judged events, is sleeves, card sleeves, ripping, tearing, wear and tear. The night before I go to play a deck in a judged event, I always re-sleeve my cards. Re-sleeve your cards, put brand new sleeves on them. I personally like Dragon Shield mats. I know there have been some weird quality issues with these, so, you know, just take it with a grain of salt, but get a good set of backup sleeves, and also have backup sleeves. If anything rips between rounds, whatever it might be, you know, you want to be able to re-sleeve those on the fly so you don't get any kind of like judge infraction for sleeves that are ripped, torn, potentially marked, or anything like that. So those are just some very basic tips for just rulings and making sure you don't go get dinged by a judge. Another thing I would like to recommend is making sure you understand the actual priority and how priority passes in Flesh and Blood. I remember one time I was playing against Prism at a Road to Nationals event, and I was on Fi, and I had played Belittle, which says as an additional cost to play Belittle, you may reveal a card with 3 or less base power, and you may search your deck for a Minnowism. So Prism does have cards, aka Arclight Sentinel, that are instant speed, that, you know, the player across from me can respond to. And that priority passes when I play the card and before the as additional cost resolves. So what I did was I played Belittle, and he had a response, but I immediately went for my deck, grabbed the Minnowism, and put it out on the field. He had a response to that. I could not go search my deck before that resolved. So I ended up getting issued a warning, and rightfully so. You need to understand those kinds of little intricacies because they will catch you on that, and you will get caught up on that. So play smarter, play slower. You know, you have 55 minutes on the clock. In my experience, most games of Flesh and Blood, unless you're playing against Oldhim, go for around 30 to 40 minutes. So you have a good 10-minute buffer to really think your plays out. As a new player, I think that's important. Think your plays out. Think how the game is going to play out. Take your time with your moves, okay? Don't overstress yourself with it. If you feel like the move you're about to make is the correct one, you know, trust your instinct, trust your deck. Get practice games in. Get practice games in before ProQuest, and I promise you it'll make you a better player in the long run. But other than that, I think that's really all I have for ProQuest, except for the one most important thing. Outside of all the rules and outside of all the you know, stress of a ProQuest season, just remember to have fun. If you are not a competitive grinder and you are not grinding super competitively and you are just there to get your first taste of competitive play, while being competitive, remember to just have fun. Have fun with it. It's in most cases, it's a long day of Flesh and Blood with a lot of really good friends. And it can be a great experience or it can be a bad experience, and that really just all depends on your attitude. So have a good attitude towards it. Don't be afraid of ProQuest season, and just enjoy yourself, guys. That's all I really have today. I plan on putting out some kind of video next week, maybe going over my plans for ProQuest. But with all that being said, I hope to have a good 2023 with the Flesh and Blood community. I will be at the Calling Indianapolis with the rest of the Pittsburgh community. We're doing a whole road trip kind of deal for it. So if you're going to be at the Calling Indianapolis and you want to meet up with Sin, let's have some fun. Let's have a couple drinks. Let's do some karaoke. Let's just go buck wild, okay? A lot of us in the Pittsburgh community are very excited for what's to come for Flesh and Blood in 2023. And that's it. Just remember to have fun, guys. Sin is out.